Here's a thought that might surprise you. Imagine waking up in the heart of ancient Rome, surrounded by the echoes of a once mighty empire, and not realizing that history had just changed forever. When the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, most people in Rome probably didn't notice. The city's streets bustled with merchants, children played in the alleys, and bakers prepared their bread as usual. Life, for the average Roman, simply went on. There was no dramatic explosion or final battle, no sudden collapse that sent shockwaves through the city. Instead, the end came quietly, almost invisibly, like the slow fading of a once bright light. The last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was quietly sent away to a villa. There were no riots in the streets, no grand speeches or public mourning. The empire's final ruler simply faded into obscurity, a footnote in the city's long story. The fall of Rome was a slow, complex process, not a single event. It was a gradual unraveling, a tapestry coming apart thread by thread over decades, even centuries. Historians mark the date for convenience, but for ordinary Romans, daily life continued. People still gathered in the markets, shared stories, and hoped for a better tomorrow, even as the world around them subtly shifted. Aqueducts still brought water, markets still opened, though both were less reliable. The city's great systems, once the envy of the world, began to falter, but they didn't stop overnight. Rome's decline was a story of gradual decay, not sudden disaster. Buildings crumbled slowly, roads became overgrown, and the city's heartbeat grew fainter with each passing year. Imagine a colossal machine running for centuries, slowly wearing down. Each part, once perfectly engineered, now grinding and creaking under the weight of time. Gears wore out, bolts loosened, and the fuel ran low. The systems that powered Rome's greatness became fragile, vulnerable to the smallest disruptions. The machine sputtered and slowed, parts breaking off while others kept moving. Some pieces held on, but the whole could never be restored to its former glory. Rome's power had already shifted to cities like Milan, Ravenna, and Constantinople. The heart of the empire was beating elsewhere, leaving the old capital a shadow of its former self. The end was less a bang, more a long, drawn-out sigh. The city exhaled, and the world moved on, barely pausing to notice. Political instability, economic troubles, military threats, and social changes all pulled the empire apart. Each force chipped away at the foundations, making the collapse inevitable. To understand Rome's collapse, we need to look at these forces one by one. Only then can we grasp the true scale of what was lost, and what endured. What really brought this ancient giant to its knees? Was it a single blow, or 1,000 tiny cuts over generations? Our journey into this history begins now. We'll peel back the layers of myth and legend to find the real story beneath. The story isn't about a single day, but about centuries of change. It's a tale of resilience, adaptation, and ultimately transformation. Rome's fall is a lesson in how great systems unravel. It's a warning and a mystery, echoing through the ruins to our own time. Let's explore the pressures that ended an era. Let's see how a civilization can fade, not with a crash, but with a whisper. The city without an emperor was just the beginning. The real story is what happened next. Welcome to the story of Rome's slow fade, a journey through the twilight of an empire, and the dawn of something new. One of Rome's biggest and most persistent problems was choosing a leader. The question of who would rule next haunted the empire for centuries, casting a long shadow over its politics and society. The empire never developed a peaceful, reliable way to transfer power from one emperor to the next. Unlike some kingdoms with clear lines of succession, Rome's leadership was always up for grabs. In later years, the throne was won by violence, not by orderly succession. Ambitious generals and politicians often saw force as the only path to power. Assassinations became common, and emperors rose and fell with alarming speed. Few rulers could ever feel truly secure, knowing betrayal might come from anyone, even their closest allies. During the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome had over 20 emperors in just 50 years, most of whom met violent ends. The empire was in a constant state of upheaval, with new leaders appearing and disappearing almost overnight. This chaos made long-term planning impossible. Projects were abandoned, reforms were left unfinished, and the people lost faith in their government. Generals and their armies fought each other for power, often ignoring the real threats at the borders. Instead of uniting against invaders, Rome's best soldiers were locked in civil wars. Civil war weakened the empire from within, draining resources and morale. As cities burned and gates fell, Rome's enemies watched and waited for their chance. Local officials, seeing the central government's weakness, often acted in their own interests. Corruption spread, and loyalty to Rome faded as governors and generals carved out their own power bases. The empire was simply too vast to manage without strong, stable leadership at the top. From Britain to Egypt, the provinces grew restless and harder to control. Diocletian tried to fix this by splitting the empire into east and west, each with its own emperor and administration. It was a bold experiment in shared rule. But the two halves slowly drifted apart, developing different cultures, economies, and even languages. What was once one empire became two very different worlds. The West, centered in Rome, became poorer and more vulnerable to attack. Its cities crumbled, and its people struggled to survive. The East, with its capital at Constantinople, grew stronger and wealthier, becoming the new center of Roman power. This division made the West's collapse almost inevitable. Isolated and weakened, it could not withstand the storms to come. Rome's leadership crisis was a fatal flaw at the heart of the empire. Without a clear path to power, chaos reigned. Without unity, the empire was doomed to fracture. The dream of a single eternal Rome faded into history. In the end, the struggle for the throne was a game no one could win, and it cost Rome everything. Rome needed vast wealth to run its army, build infrastructure, and feed its people. The empire's prosperity depended on a constant flow of resources: grain from Egypt, taxes from distant provinces, and tribute from conquered lands. Every road, aqueduct, and public building was a testament to Rome's financial might. For centuries, conquest brought in gold, silver, and slaves. Victorious legions returned with spoils, filling the treasury and fueling the economy. Trade flourished, and the empire's coffers seemed bottomless. But when expansion stopped, so did the easy money. The frontiers hardened, and Rome's borders became a costly burden to defend rather than a source of new wealth. Emperors raised taxes, hitting farmers and small landowners hardest. The burden grew heavier each year as officials squeezed more from those who could least afford it. Many lost their land, widening the gap between rich and poor. The wealthy elite bought up struggling farms, while ordinary Romans slipped into poverty or debt. High taxes discouraged trade and broke down the empire's economic network. Merchants closed their stalls, and once busy ports fell silent. Regions became isolated, producing only for themselves. Local economies shrank, and self-sufficiency replaced the vibrant exchange that once united the empire. The once thriving Mediterranean economy fragmented, trade routes broke down, and cities that had prospered for centuries began to empty out. Meanwhile, expenses soared, especially for the military and government bureaucracy. The cost of defending the vast borders and maintaining order drained the treasury even further. Bread and circuses kept the urban poor content, but drained the treasury. Free grain and lavish games were meant to prevent unrest, but they came at a steep price. Rome was living on borrowed time, spending more than it took in. The empire's debts mounted, and the treasury's reserves dwindled. The economic foundation was cracking under the weight of unsustainable costs. Roads and aqueducts fell into disrepair, and public services faltered. The middle class, once Rome's backbone, disappeared. Skilled workers and merchants abandoned the cities, seeking better lives elsewhere. The empire's empty pockets left it weak and vulnerable. With fewer resources, Rome struggled to respond to new threats and internal crises. Without wealth, Rome couldn't solve its growing problems. The empire's leaders watched as their options dwindled and their power slipped away. The slow-motion economic collapse was underway, setting the stage for the empire's eventual fall. When taxes and conquest failed, emperors tried another fix: making more money. They debased the currency, mixing silver coins with cheaper metals. Over time, coins lost their value, people noticed, and inflation soared. Prices skyrocketed, savings evaporated, and trust in money vanished. Trade became chaotic. Many returned to bartering goods instead of using coins. The government even demanded taxes in grain or supplies, not worthless coins. The economy regressed, undoing centuries of progress. Large-scale trade collapsed, replaced by local, primitive exchanges. The debasement meant to solve problems only made things worse. Hyperinflation destroyed confidence in the state. Farmers and artisans bore the brunt, struggling to survive. The financial crisis deepened Rome's decline. The empire's money was no longer real, and neither was its power. Economic trust, once lost, is hard to regain. Rome's currency crisis was a turning point on the road to ruin. Rome's borders once held back waves of outsiders, barbarians as Romans called them. But as Rome weakened, pressure from migrating tribes grew. The Huns pushed groups like the Goths and Vandals into Roman lands, creating a refugee crisis. In 376 AD, the Goths crossed the Danube, seeking safety, but were mistreated by Roman officials. Their rebellion led to the Battle of Adrianople, where the Goths killed Emperor Valens and shattered Roman military prestige. After that, more tribes crossed the borders. The Vandals swept into North Africa, the Franks into Gaul, and in 410 AD, the Visigoths sacked Rome. The city's fall was a psychological shock. The walls had been breached. Rome was no longer invincible. The empire's borders were now open doors. The barbarians were not just at the gates, they were inside. Rome's legions were once legendary, but by the end the army was a shadow of its former self. Economic decline meant fewer Roman citizens joined up, so the empire recruited barbarian soldiers, foederati. These troops were loyal to their own leaders, not Rome. Discipline and unity suffered. Generals of barbarian origin held real power. Civil wars drained resources, and the army was stretched thin across too many fronts. Equipment and pay declined, morale collapsed. Rome could no longer defend its vast borders. The military, once Rome's strength, became its weakness. The war machine sputtered, unable to stop the empire's fall. Roman society itself was changing. Traditional values faded, replaced by apathy and division. The gap between rich and poor widened. The elite withdrew from public life. Plagues and population decline deepened the sense of crisis. Citizenship was extended to all, but this diluted what it meant to be Roman. People's loyalties shifted to local regions or new religions. The social glue that held the empire together dissolved. Rome's foundation crumbled from within. As Rome declined, Christianity rose. Once persecuted, Christians became a powerful force after Constantine's conversion. The church offered hope, charity, and a new sense of community. It preserved knowledge and provided leadership as the old systems failed. But it also shifted focus from the empire to the church, drawing resources and talent away from the state. Christianity became the new glue of society, but changed Roman identity forever. The church outlasted the empire, shaping the medieval world. A new faith helped build a new world from Rome's ruins. Rome's fall isn't just ancient history, it's a lesson for every civilization. Political chaos, economic crisis, military overreach, and social decay are timeless challenges. Rome's story shows how complex systems can unravel. We see its legacy in our languages, laws, architecture, and ideas of government. The echoes of Rome shape our world today. Studying its fall helps us understand our own societies. History is a guide, not just a record. Civilizations rise and fall, but their lessons endure. Rome never truly vanished, it transformed. The story of Rome is the story of us. By learning from the past, we prepare for the future. The cosmos is full of cycles, creation and collapse. Our journey through history continues.